Welcome to the BirdLife South Africa virtual fair. And there's going to be something for just about everybody. So tune in and stay tuned with us. I'm Jenny Crwys-Williams, and sitting opposite me or next to me is Sandiswa Kula. And Sandiswa, take me through Sandiswa. Sandiswa is not the right way. Just take us through that.
So Sandiswa and Sandiswa would be two different tenses in Xhosa. So Sandiswa is how you say my name, but most people would go Sandiswa. And that just changes because it means to add value. But then if you pronounce it as Sandiswa, it means they added value. So it's like a past tense of me adding value currently.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, no,
Okay.
it does. It does.
Yeah.
And I think that's very American as well, don't? Because they very often end words with like a question mark. Yes. Almost, yes. which it isn't. But anyway, it's lovely to meet you face to face.
Finally.
And of course, well, I mean, we met, before, yes. But we met online. And in the interval, I think it's over a year since I first interviewed you. Yes. I mean, your popularity has grown. And for people who don't know anything about you, just explain what you do.
So originally, I'm a nature conservation fanatic, fan, student, learner, and I'm a fan of the environment. But then I just stumbled onto birds. And then next thing I know, I was having the camera, and then I was a bird photographer. But my first love is nature. And I stumbled onto birds via plants. So if you ask me about plants, I can give you some information. If you ask me about birds, I can give you a lot of information. But naturally, I'm into the natural environment because I grew up in a village. And in the village, the main thing that you do is herd goats, take care of chickens, which is my granny's first love. But if you find Sandiswa, you find her either in the village with the chickens, my granny, my niece now. But if you take me outside of that, then I'm hiking somewhere, taking pictures of plants, photographing birds, landscapes, and anything to do with the environment.
So where did that come from? Obviously, because of your surroundings initially, because you were born and brought up in a small village.
Yes.
But it doesn't necessarily translate. You might end up as an astronaut for all I know, you know. So where did it come? Was there a spark at all?
Now that I think about it, I think there's always been a spark because I was always following my grandfather with the goats. I was always following anyone who'd be outside instead of being indoors. And then when I moved for varsity, it was to study something I didn't realize what at the moment, at that particular time. And I did conservation ecology, but I wasn't very fond of it because it was very theoretical. And I didn't realize I didn't like theory until I did it. And then I moved to nature conservation, and that had the practical side of it. I was like, oh, I can actually work at a national park. I can actually do something with what I love growing up back home. And then the photography, I stumbled upon enjoying a botanical garden. And I think it's just one of those things that you don't realize you enjoy until you actually put into that situation. And you just, I would like to say prosper. So I'm enjoying it.
So, I mean, I think that's why so many people go up to university, think they're going to be lawyers and end up as ballet dancers. Definitely. You know, there's just because everything opens up, doesn't it?
I was actually telling someone when we were driving from the airport earlier on, I always thought I'd be a doctor because I was a fan of Grey's Anatomy. I was a fan of anything medical until I had to go job shadowing at Tygerberg Hospital. I couldn't even walk into the hospital. I was like, but I always loved medicine or the thought of medicine because I watched it, it was glamorized on TV, but I couldn't stand being there. And then I didn't know what I was going to do with my life because now everything I thought I would be was just snatched away from me. So I think it's one of those things where you need to learn outside the class or whatever people tell you is supposed to be a learning experience. And for me, life in general was that thing that taught me never box it in, because if you box yourself in, then you end up losing out on a lot of things that you don't even realize are your passion.
So when I interviewed you, you described yourself as a village girl. You still describe yourself as a village girl, but you were about to leave the village and you were about to go and live somewhere else and, you know, broaden your horizons and things, but you haven't.
I don't see myself doing it actually as well, especially on a long-term basis. Village life, especially over the past year, because when we spoke, it was over a year and a half ago. And
it must have been before COVID.
I think it was after, because I moved back home just before COVID. I moved back home around March 2020. We spoke last year, January.
Okay.
I remember because I had to do a year recap last year, December, and yours was the first thing that I actually did that was outside the box for me. I still remember that specifically because I didn't realize when I started taking pictures that I would have to travel just because I take pictures. And having to speak to you the way I spoke to you, it was one of those things that were like, but this is life. And it's not going according to the plans I thought I'd had. But when we spoke, I was thinking, village life is too small for me. I just moved back from Cape Town after 10, 11 years of being, 12 years of being in Cape Town. That's a long time. And I still had the city mindset in me that I can do nothing in the village because all the opportunities are in the city base. And now I've been doing a lot of the stuff from the village. If I need to do anything, I can travel to where I need to be and still go back to the village. Yes, signal is a bit wonky at times, but I can still live a very fulfilling life, be in the village, at the same time teach people that the village is livable. Because I think even me, I had the misconception that if you're in the village, it's a dead end. What can you do? It's dusty. Sometimes you don't even need load shedding. The power just goes off if there's too much wind. Yes, that's our house. But I had to learn that you make opportunities anyway, as long as you take yourself out of the I'm in the village mindset. And look at me now, I'm in Joburg, and that was from the village. And I don't see it moving anytime soon. If I move, it's going to be for 2 weeks and then go back to the village in 2 weeks because Granny is still there. And now I have a niece who's a month and 2 days old.
But even if Granny wasn't there, I think it's kind of part of you. I think that you just love living there, It's
part of my identity, actually. Like if you see village, most chances you'll see Sandiswa next to the smiling with a thumbs up, like, come join me, even if it's just for a holiday. But it's one of those things I've learned. It's part of what makes me me. And some people might not understand it, but I've had to learn that I don't have to be outside of there to actually live a very fulfilling life. And as amazing as my granny is, even if she was not there, I wouldn't necessarily leave the village forever. I would leave for 2 weeks, come back for 2 weeks in a month, just to balance everything out.
Now, you see, I think I'm one of the few people that have had the opportunity to almost speak to Granny.
Yes.
Because we tried quite hard. So there are lots of people who don't know what on earth we're talking about. So now we're going to let you into the secret and you're going to find out about Granny. So just explain, because she's queen in her kingdom.
Yes, and everyone has to know it. With the birds, my first love was just the birds. And we have chickens at home, and it's my granny's first love. So she got, she loves the chickens more than us. And she tells us, she's like, they cannot speak for themselves. So I'll take care of them first, and then I deal with you. So there were kestrels that were just wreaking havoc with our chickens, and my granny was not a fan of the birds. So we would clash every few days when the chickens would be dwindling, and then she's like, what's going on? What's happening with my chickens? I'm like, I was trying to see what bird would come, and she's like, but your birds are not important, my chickens are. So she's one of those people who enjoy that I enjoy what I'm doing, but as long as her chickens are taken care of. And now the dogs, and now the cats, and now my niece. So
in that order, probably.
Yes. But I think my niece has overtaken a few things because she's one of those doting great grandparents now. Oh, great grandparent! Wow, she's old. But she's a fan of the birds now because I enjoy it. But I shouldn't forget that her chickens come above anything that I would actually like to capture.
So do you think any of this would have happened had we not had what some people say is the curse of the world, and that's social media?
I don't think so. Because even when I used to work in Cape Town, I was not a big fan of social media. Like, I've had Twitter for 12 years. I was not big on it. I didn't even realize how to use it until I actually paid attention to how I could use it. Because I think the people's misconceptions are that you can just use social media for anything, but it's how you choose to use it. And I saw that it's a way for me to show everyone the other side of being where I am. And it's where everyone tends to live, because everyone wants to get out of the village and go to the city. And I was moving from the city to the village, and I was sharing my experience just for the sake of sharing. And now social media took me from the village and sharing that with everyone who's in the city who overlooks the village. So I think social media had to play a very big role in it, because without it, I'd still be just in the village and enjoying it myself.
So you see, there's a real charm to your posts, because Granny woke up in a bad mood this morning and shouted at me when I didn't see the chickens because I was watching a sparrowhawk or something like that. And then which came first, the photography or the posts? Or were they simultaneous?
The photography for me, because I'd been taking pictures of birds since, when did I move back to Cape Town? 2018. And I was given free reign of social media at work. And they were like, okay, Instagram, here's the password, everything, you deal with that. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. What am I supposed to do? They're like, no, you try to lure people in so that they can see what you enjoy at the botanical garden. I was like, oh, okay, that's easy enough. I just take pictures and share them so that they can come and see themselves. And that's when my first thing was like, oh, I could actually do this to market my job to everyone. And then when I left my job, I didn't have a camera of my own. So I was like, okay, what can I do? So I wrote stories about pictures I'd taken previously. Because I remember one of my first posts that I did on BirdLife was about, what was it? A wood owl, yes, that I'd seen at work 2 years prior. And the story behind it was because someone had showed me a bird, and it was an owl. And they were like, Sissy, did you see an owl? It's during the day. So it was raining. I had one of my knees was messed up from soccer. I was limping all over the place, but I got the picture. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. So now I don't have a camera to take the pictures, but I have all those pictures. What can I do with them? Oh, share them. Next thing I know, I can actually get my own camera. And now I'm having an opportunity to actually go out and get more stories and share them. And people are like, oh, we enjoy it. I was like, oh, okay, cool. This is something I can share with the world. Next came Granny. Next came the stories with the birds and the chickens. And it just...
But there's also, I mean, anybody who is potty about birds knows that almost nothing will stand in your way. Maybe a lion or something like that. Even then, okay. But it was you getting lost in a thorn thicket, trying to get a photograph of a wretched bird, and failing maybe, or it was just a blur, and whatever. So people, I think, responded to that, and were able to share it vicariously, because they didn't have to do that. You were doing it for them.
And I've gotten a lot of people who say to me, that's happened to me before. And then I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm not the only one. I'm not the only crazy person who actually stops a car when you're driving. I'm not the only one who'd actually limp through thorns just to get a picture. And then when you get there, the bird is gone. So it's always those things of, I'm thinking I'm the only one, but when you share it with people, they're like, oh, no, I've been there before as well. So it's nice for people to interlink using the same thing that we all enjoy and love. And birding just happens to be one of those things, and we all love it.
So how has, for instance, BirdLife, because you've got a relationship with BirdLife, how has that helped to change your life? And I think that also led, I know that you use a Canon, and that was given to you or loaned to you or something, because that must have changed your photography.
Definitely. I never foresaw BirdLife happening the way it did, because as someone in nature conservation, you all aspire to work at certain companies or even just know someone there. And BirdLife is one of those places where you're like, if I could get just a toe in, you don't even look for the whole foot, just a toe in. And I'd been applying like years before, but I didn't. And then when I did the photography, I was like, oh, okay. And then I got people who work here contacting me, but I was like, guys, can you check this email address? It says at BirdLife. They're like, yeah, so it's one of those things where the dream that you didn't realize was there is actually they're just waiting for you to actually find a way. And when Canon happened, it was via BirdLife because I had saved up for my first camera, which was a Canon, because I fell in love with Canon when I used to work in Cape Town. And then I didn't realize that Canon, the company, would take my photography to the point where I'd work with them as well. So being just online, it goes back to social media. It allowed me to meet people that I never thought I would meet, even in my wildest dreams, because I'd been trying, but that didn't work out. But when I stopped trying, everything just seemed to open up, and look at me now and where I am.
Well, you know, it's a whole career basically, and it's this around the world.
Yeah.
I mean, there are bird nuts
Yes.
everywhere you look, and then there are people who do it as a living,
Yes,
and research it and whatever. But I think your charm is the village that you live in, your wonderful relationship with your grandmother.
yes.
And it's very special because she's quite elderly now, isn't she?
Yes, she's turning 80 on New Year's Day.
Ah.
So it's one of those things. It's New Year, but it's Granny's birthday first. She is the love of my life. I've lived with my paternal family since I was a month old. So she and my grandfather, the parents that I knew from a very early age. And my grandfather taught me how to mark out goats. Like everything that I know anywhere goes back to either him or my grandmother. So she's one of those true north for me and my sister, because we are the only siblings who live with my paternal family. And as strict as she is, because she is super strict, you don't take anything without two hands. You don't say anything without a thank you. You don't shake hands without having a second. Like all those small things you overlook, even when I do overlook them, I'm like, but if Granny was there, she'd smack me. She still smacks me.
Does she?
I'm 32.
Does she?
Yes. She gives me the evil eye, like, who taught you that? So there's a few things that I sometimes overlook, and then back of my mind, I'm like, would Granny be proud of this? So she's one of those people that just navigate my life, even when I don't realize that. And in her elderly years, she sometimes, sorry, ma, drives us nuts because she forgets she's elderly. So she tries to do all the stuff she was doing 10 years ago. And then she gets sick from overworking herself, but we can't tell her, but we told you so. Because she's like, I'm the parent here. So it's one of those things where you just have to take it with a pinch of salt and pepper, because if you don't do it, you get a smack. But I love it. I love her. I enjoy it. And it's amazing.
So the people in the village, do they think you're crazy?
Yes.
Yeah.
They still, like in the beginning, when I first got home, I didn't have a camera then. I got a camera like a couple of months into me moving back to the village. Because when I moved back from Cape Town, I lived with my aunt in PE, Gqeberha. Gqeberha, yes. So I lived there for like a year. And then I was saving up for my first camera. The moment I got my first camera, I moved back to the village. I was like, I need some peace and quiet. And when I first started walking around with the camera in tow, and they were like, what are you looking for? Like, we can help. I was like, no, I'm just bird watching. They're like, what is that? So I had to explain, because for them, growing up, especially some of my age mates, they were like, oh yeah, they used to use birds as aiming shots for slings. But now I'm like, no, I'm just taking pictures of the birds. They're like, why? I'm like, just for the fun of it. I hadn't even started sharing them then. And then they were like, okay, it's that white person thing. You were in Stellenbosch for 10 years, we understand. So they let me be. And then after a while, they were like, but we see your following online is getting a bit broader. What is this thing? So I tried to explain to them. And when I got to do, what was it, carte blanche? Yes. Then everyone was like, oh, okay, so this is something that's actually worth looking into. In the beginning, but some of them still think like, yeah, it's not something worth looking into because it's for crazy people. You can't just sit there for an hour looking for just one shot of a bird. Like, what am I supposed to do with the other 59 minutes? Like, the joy is just sitting and waiting and learning the patience that only birding can teach you.
But also there's the knowledge that comes from it, because you've got to be sitting in the right place.
Yes.
There've got to be the right food plants around.
Yes.
So it's
right
that
time.
whole
and the right time
and
as
the
well.
right time,
Yes.
and all of that. So what sort of birds in that village, which is quite isolated in the eastern part of the country? Yes. What sort of birds can you expect to get there? And do you sometimes get birds that shouldn't be there?
There's I didn't even realize we had such a biodiverse area until I started paying attention to what's actually there, because I grew up there and the only birds I could name were the kestrel, the hoopoe, and the Cape Sparrow, because those are always around the yard, and the wagtail once in a while. But when I first started paying attention to what actually happens around here, I was like, oh, but that's a dead cuckoo. But like I didn't realize that we get that here because I've only seen pictures of it online. And then I saw literally yesterday when we were driving to PE a hammerkop there. I was like, what? I usually see you on TV, and that was a lifer for me yesterday, but I couldn't take a picture.
Was it in the village or,
yes,
or on? Okay.
Yes, it was in the village because we were driving next to, there's a river before you get to the main road that goes to town. And it was just chilling there. I was like, I had seen something that looked like it before, but then yesterday was the first time I could actually ID and be like, that is definitely a hammerkop. And then I saw the southern ground hornbill. I haven't been able to picture them, but then when people ask you, it was like, are you supposed to get it there? I was like, I don't know. I saw it here until I looked at it. I was like, oh, they actually do travel around a bit, but they're not there predominantly as compared to the Highveld, for example. So people were like, but then those are only seen. I was like, I don't know. All I know is that if you ask my granny, she'll tell you the one time she saw them, they were breaking everyone's window. Because the year before I moved back home, there was a big storm. And just before the storm hit, our primary school lost all its windows because of southern ground hornbills that were just pecking at the windows. And I realized that they thought that it's a mirror. So they were pecking at, that's what the elderly people, when I asked what's going on, they said, they saw themselves on the window and they were pecking at what looks like them. So I was like, I didn't realize that you get those here. And then I saw just recently, Feb or March, a gray-crowned crane. Yes. And I didn't know you get those there either. So it was like, what is the village doing to me? Why am I going to Kruger if I can see all these birds here? So it's one of those things where you don't realize how diverse everything is until you sit and listen and watch and be like, oh, okay, nice to meet you here. I was expecting to see you in Joburg, but it's cool to see you here as well. So
the numbers of people who are watching this, they're going to be young people there as well.
I hope so.
and I mean, one of the things to do in a world that is increasingly complex and stressful to live in, this is the most wonderful outlet. If you can bring up your children to love wildlife, to love animals, to actually know that the meat you're eating comes from a cow, etc., because we're losing that because of the rush to cities and things. So what would you like to do to enhance what you are doing for maybe young people?
I always answer this question in a way that says, if I could get, for every 10 kids out there, if I could get just 2 to look at the environment as their phone, because as young people, our phone is our lifeline. Like social media is one of those things where if you could just get 2 kids out of 10 to look at the environment and nature as a baby, like they look at their phones and social media, I'll be happy, because it means 20% now is very tuned to what's going on around them. And those 20% could change someone else's life, because we can't change everyone at the same time. But we also need to remember that birding and the environment and nature is not just for elderly people, because we all live in this world together, elderly and young. We just need a way to market it in a way for us youngsters to consume it as much as we consume music and movies and a series that's new on the market. I don't know how we can do that properly, because I'm lucky enough to have grown up with it from the village. But for someone in the city, how do we learn them to enjoy the environment outside of the bustling city life and the street lights and the noise and so if I could just get a certain amount of people who are educated enough that we need the environment as much as we think we don't, because a lot of us think like, invincible us, we can't, but the environment is our lifeline. More than your phone, more than social media. I don't know, it's just one of those things where all us nature nerds can just get our heads together and be like, let's educate without sounding like we're preaching. I don't know how we can do it, because we've been trying, but
by having fun, I think.
Is it?
I think so.
I think maybe if we can have fun, but still getting someone outside of the couch and the TV and the phone. We just need something that's going to lure them as much as a series lures them into a pint of ice cream and enjoying the couch on a nice chilly day like today.
Well, I mean, they're wonderful things. I mean, do you have a bird that you are particularly fond of?
That's asking me which aunt of mine is my favorite. Oh, I always tell people it depends on my mood and what bird decides to be fun. Because if you had asked me 2 or 3 months ago, the Didrik cuckoo would be that bird, because that was my birthday gift to myself. The first picture that was proper that I took of it was on my birthday in November. And if you ask me around summertime, it's an African hoopoo. If you ask me when I'm walking next to a river, it would be
Fish eagle.
Yes, which is one of my favorite because I've only seen it from afar and I want to get a picture of it that's proper and up close, but they're not working out because they seem to know that I'm looking for them. So I have a lot of favorites, but they go according to mood swings, where I am, how I'm feeling, or what's actually interacting properly with me.
Well, I think there's so many wonderful things to be seen. And I'm wondering, if you had to get onto a plane, where you would like that plane to take you in order to see specific birds. There's a wonderful book written by a guy called Vernon Head,
Yes.
who used to be, do you know Vernon?
I know of him, yeah.
He's nutty. And but he's a wonderful writer, and he tells the story of a nightjar, excuse me, of a nightjar that was found in Ethiopia. And it wasn't the whole bird, it was just the wing.
Okay.
And it was trampled in the mud. And it was found about 50 years ago. And it was taken back to England,
okay,
where they realized that nobody had ever seen a nightjar's wing on that shape and that size.
Okay.
And so it was this invisible bird, and people used to go to Ethiopia to look for it. Not me, but you know, people. And so a group of South Africans went there because they understood the bush, and they went there to look for this search. Yes. And the title of the book is The Search for the Rarest Bird in the World.
Yeah.
And it is just like, it's like an adventure story. It's humorous, it's funny, it's whatever. And the answer is they actually never really saw a real one, but they do know that the real ones exist. So they've seen more than a wing.
Yes.
And the wonderful thing is, how do you, if I was sitting in a classroom now, how do you identify a bird? Just by a wing. But it's so unique, that
yes.
wing, and people who are trained kind of know they've seen something special. So where would you go?
I want to say I would like to go and see a hummingbird. But I'm always one of those people who want to travel SA first, which I haven't been able to do. So in Narina Trogon, for me, everyone who asks me, that's because it's so beautiful and gorgeous and evasive. Because everyone who's the first time I heard that name was like, that sounds like something from a Star Wars movie. So it's not a bird. And then I Googled it. I saw how beautiful it was and how few people have actually seen it just when they go birding. So I would want to go there. And it's in the Eastern Cape, where a lot of people have told me they've seen it. In Kwelecha, a lot of people have even asked me to go there, but I haven't had time. I haven't had ways to get to East London without leaving my granny exposed at home and everything. Even now, there's someone who's helping look after my niece and my granny. So if I could, Narina Trogon is the first one. And then when I actually go abroad, any of the hummingbirds, like I would love to see, because they say they fly so quickly. And even the videos I've seen on YouTube, they're so quick. And just trying to get that one picture, just that one, it doesn't have to be even a beautiful one. Just the fact that I can say I caught a glimpse of a hummingbird on my camera would be, yes.
Well, you've no idea how much I have loved talking to you.
It's been amazing.
and what a wonderful gift BirdLife is giving to everybody watching, to be able to listen to you and your passion, but also your wonderful sense of humor as well.
I tried to.
So, well, I mean, you've either got it, you know, or not. You can't pretend to have a sense of humor, can you? Oh, that's very funny, isn't it?
Is it?
You've just got it. So, Sandiswa, lovely talking to you again. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for actually meeting me this time around. Talking to you over the phone was amazing, but getting to meet you. So thanks to BirdLife as well. to actually making this a possibility. I've enjoyed it. It was fun, and hopefully we get to do it again.
And we'll do it
sometime.
again.
Definitely.
And this time, maybe Granny will speak to me.
I highly
Instead
doubt it.
instead of me hearing her in the background saying,
I
no,
don't want to talk.
no.
Hopefully, but she refuses to travel anyway. So we'll have to, I don't know, gate crash her house, take a video, pretend that we're not talking to you. I don't know, we'll figure it out.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.